It was such a small moment, barely a few seconds, but it changed everything. I was halfway through peeling off my damp t-shirt when I saw him, Eli, standing at the edge of the hallway, his hands still on the doorframe, eyes fixed right on me. I froze, my fingers clenched in the fabric, chest exposed, breathing shallow from the run I'd just finished. We locked eyes, and he didn't look away. That's the part that stuck with me. Not the fact that he caught me changing. That kind of stuff happens when you share a two-bedroom apartment with paper-thin walls and no real sense of privacy. It was the way he looked at me. Calm, direct, still, and then he just walked off. Didn't say a word. Just turned and disappeared into his room like nothing had happened. I stood there for a full minute, shirt bunched in my hand, heart racing like I'd been caught doing something wrong. But I hadn't. Right? I was just changing in my own room. The door had been almost closed. Almost. Apparently not enough. I finally pulled the shirt all the way off and tossed it into the laundry basket, trying to pretend like that moment hadn't just branded itself into my brain. But it had. And I couldn't shake it. Eli and I had been roommates for about 7 months. We weren't best friends, but we got along. The kind of coexistence that felt like a quiet partnership. Shared bills, shared space, and just enough conversation to keep things from being awkward. He was the more private one between us. Worked in tech, had long hours, rarely brought anyone over. Always kind, always a little distant. I'd never really thought of him that way. Okay, that's not true. There were moments. The way he stretched in the mornings, his t-shirt riding up just enough to show the edge of his stomach, or how he looked when he was focused, sitting at the kitchen table, glasses slipping down his nose, hoodie sleeves pushed up to his forearms. Little things. Nothing I let myself linger on for long. Until now. Because now there was that look, that pause, that decision not to turn away. The rest of the day passed like normal. Or at least, it looked like it did. Eli stayed in his room for most of the evening, headphones on, typing away like always. I cooked something I didn't even taste. We exchanged a few words about rent being due soon, about the leaky sink in the bathroom. Casual stuff, but under it all, there was this tension, at least on my end. I kept wondering if he'd bring it up, or if I should. Maybe I was overthinking the whole thing. Maybe he was just spaced out. Maybe he wasn't even looking at me, just through me. But that's not what it felt like. It felt like he saw something, and liked what he saw. That night, I barely slept. Not because anything happened. Not because Eli said or did anything strange after that moment in the hallway. Everything on the surface stayed exactly the same. But that's the thing. It was too normal. He acted like it hadn't happened, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tossed and turned until almost 2 a.m., staring up at the ceiling, wondering what he'd been thinking in that second. If it had meant anything. If it was just one of those awkward roommate moments that's better off ignored. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like a quiet line had been crossed. Not in a bad way, just different. The next morning, I woke up late. The apartment was already quiet. Eli's door was closed, his empty coffee mug in the sink like usual. I stood in the kitchen for a while, eating dry cereal straight from the box, hoping he'd come out, say something, anything, that would give me some clue as to what was going on in his head. Nothing. He stayed in his room until he had to leave for work. I heard his door creak, keys jingle, and then the front door open. Before he stepped out, I finally caught a glimpse of him. Hoodie on, eyes a little tired, backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at me, just for a second. "See you tonight," he said. His tone was light, like any other day, but there was something else in his face, something quieter, more careful. I almost said something, but I didn't. "Yeah? See ya?" And he was gone. The next time we actually talked was that evening. He came home later than usual, dropped his bag by the couch, and joined me in the kitchen while I was heating up leftover pasta. He leaned against the counter and opened a beer, taking a long sip before glancing over at me. "You beat your running time yesterday?" he asked, almost casually. My stomach twisted. He was bringing that day up? "Not really," I said. "Just ran to clear my head." He nodded, watching me a little too carefully. Cool. You looked. He paused, lips pressing together for a second before he shrugged. Focused. Focused. That wasn't the word I thought he was going to say. I didn't respond. Just stirred the pasta and tried to ignore the flush crawling up the back of my neck. He took another sip. I didn't mean to catch you off guard yesterday. The door looked closed. I froze. It was the first time he'd acknowledged it. I turned slowly, spoon still in hand. Yeah, I guess it wasn't all the way shut. Eli held my gaze for a second too long. He didn't look embarrassed. If anything, he looked like he was waiting for how I'd react, maybe. For a sign. And I gave him one. Just a slight nod. Barely more than a breath. But I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Not a smirk. Not quite. More like something in him just relaxed. Then he looked down, pushed off the counter, and headed to his room. I watched him go, trying to figure out what exactly we'd just said and what we hadn't. Because something was definitely happening, and we were both pretending it wasn't. The next few days were a strange kind of limbo. Nothing obvious changed. No dramatic confrontations, no midnight confessions. We still lived like we always had. Shared groceries, passed each other in the hallway, took turns washing the dishes. But underneath it all, something had shifted. It was in the pauses. The small silences that lingered just a little too long. In the way Eli would glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Or maybe he wanted me to see. I don't know. His looks weren't obvious, weren't hungry or weird. But they held curiosity. Like he was still trying to figure something out. And I realized I was doing the same. Every time I heard his door creak open, I felt that quiet flutter in my chest. Like something was about to happen, even though nothing ever did. I started to notice things about him I'd never let myself think about too much. The way he bit the inside of his cheek when he was reading. The way his voice dropped when he was tired. The way he'd come back from a run, flushed, breathing heavy, and head straight to the fridge for cold water. Shirt clinging to his back, sweat darkened at the shoulders. I'd be lying if I said I didn't look. But I kept it to myself until Saturday night. He was sprawled on the couch in his usual hoodie, half watching some mindless action movie on Netflix. I sat down next to him, flipping through my phone, trying not to think about how close we were. Our knees brushed. Just barely. But neither of us moved. So, he said suddenly, eyes still on the screen, "You seeing anyone?" I blinked. "What?" He glanced over at me, like he wanted to play it off as casual, but his tone had changed. It was too direct to be nothing. "Just asking," he said. "You never really talk about that stuff." I hesitated. "Not really. I've been kind of taking a break." Eli nodded slowly, his eyes back on the screen. "Guys or girls?" That time, I stared at him. "You don't know?" He smirked. Small, crooked, not quite teasing. I figured, but I didn't want to assume. I was quiet for a second. "You?" He shrugged. "Never really talked about it." That was the answer, and not the answer. And he knew it. I leaned back, letting my head rest against the top of the couch. "So are we just going to keep dancing around it?" He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "I saw you, that day," and I didn't look away. I turned my head toward him, my heart thudding. He looked calm. Not smug, not embarrassed. Just honest. "I didn't plan to," he added, "but I didn't want to lie about it either." There was a pause. Then I looked because I wanted to. I felt my breath catch, not out of shock, but from the rawness of it. The way he just said it like that. No games, no shame. "I haven't stopped thinking about it," he admitted. "About you." He finally looked at me. And I didn't look away either. I don't remember what was on the TV anymore. I just remember the silence that followed what he said, that he hadn't stopped thinking about me. I should have said something clever, something that would diffuse the tension, or at least make us laugh and move on. But nothing came out. I just looked at him, and he looked right back. That silence, It wasn't awkward. It was electric. I could feel it in the space between us, the way our knees still touched, the way the air felt warmer all of a sudden. My mouth had gone dry, but my palms were damp. It was the kind of moment you don't really see happening in real time until you're in it, and then every second feels stretched out, heavy with possibility. He leaned in slightly, just enough to close the space by an inch, then another. "I didn't want to make it weird," he said, voice lower now. "But it kind of already is, isn't it?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Only if we pretend it didn't happen." His eyes flicked to my mouth, then back up. "So what now?" he asked. I swallowed. "I don't know. You tell me." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached over, slow and careful, and rested his hand just lightly against my knee. His thumb grazed my jeans. Barely a touch, but it felt like fire. My heart was thudding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I didn't think you'd be okay with this," he said, almost like he was still unsure. "I didn't think you ever noticed me like that." I gave a quiet laugh, nervous, but real. "That's funny. I thought you'd never notice me at all." His lips curved into something halfway between relief and something else, something softer. The room felt impossibly small now. He moved his hand slightly, resting it more fully against my leg, this time with a kind of quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "I wasn't sure," he said. "For a long time. I didn't know what I wanted. I still don't, maybe. But I know I wanted to look." There was something so honest in his voice that I didn't feel the need to challenge it or press for more. He wasn't offering me a label or a promise, just truth, and that was enough. I placed my hand over his, gently but deliberately. We didn't kiss. Not yet. We just sat there on the couch, the movie long forgotten, the glow of the screen painting soft shadows across his face. He looked calm again, like the version of him I knew before, except now I understood the tension that had always been behind his quiet. Eventually, he spoke again. "Can we just stay here a little while?" I nodded. "Yeah, we can." We didn't say much after that. Just sat, side by side, his hand under mine, our knees still touching. Something had cracked open between us. Something we weren't ready to name. But it was real. And we both knew it. The next morning felt surreal. We hadn't done anything dramatic, hadn't kissed, hadn't touched beyond that one quiet moment on the couch, but I woke up feeling like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't go back. Eli was already up when I walked into the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, barefoot in sweats, sipping his coffee like it was any other day. Like everything hadn't shifted between us. I hesitated in the doorway for half a second, unsure of how to act. He looked up, and his expression softened the moment he saw me. "Morning," he said, casual. But it carried something behind it. A kind of knowing. "Hey," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "Sleep okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, you?" Eventually, he slid a mug across the counter toward me. My usual. No sugar, just oat milk. It was such a small thing, but it hit me in a quiet place. The kind of gesture that says more than 1,000 words. We stood in the kitchen, drinking in comfortable silence. Until he said, "You kept thinking about it too, didn't you, that moment?" I met his eyes. There wasn't any point in pretending. "Yeah, every night." He nodded like he already knew, but it still seemed like he needed to hear me say it out loud. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said, voice a little lower. I saw you, and something clicked. Like something I'd been ignoring for a while." I stepped closer, not touching him, just standing near enough that he'd feel it. "You're not freaking out?" I asked. He shook his head. "I thought I would, but no. Actually, it's kind of the opposite." That made me smile. He set his mug down and leaned back against the counter, looking at me now in a way that wasn't shy or hesitant, like he'd already made a decision, or was ready to. "So what happens now?" he asked. It wasn't a challenge, more like an invitation. I walked over to him, slow, careful. There wasn't tension this time, Just a hum, warm and quiet, running between us. I stopped just a foot away. "I don't know," I said, "but I think I want to find out." He looked at me, eyes searching mine. "Yeah," he said softly. "Me too." And then, finally, he leaned in. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't intense. It was gentle and deliberate, like he wanted to make sure I had time to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, warm and unsure at first, then again with more intention. My hands found his waist, his hoodie soft under my fingers. He exhaled against me, like something in him had relaxed completely. We stayed like that for a long moment, just touching, just breathing. When we finally pulled apart, he smiled, really smiled. "Well," he said quietly, "that was a better start to the day than coffee." I laughed, and it felt light, like the air had cleared. The rest of the day moved slow. We didn't define anything. We didn't need to. We cooked breakfast together. We sat at the table like always. But now his leg rested against mine under the table, and neither of us moved away. Something had begun, and neither of us was pretending anymore. Over the next week, everything and nothing changed at the same time. We still went about our lives. Dishes got done, laundry got folded, bills got paid, but there was a current under everything now. Quiet touches, lingering glances, the way Eli's hand would brush mine when we passed each other in the hallway, and he wouldn't pull away, and the way I'd wait for it. Some nights we ended up on the couch, shoulders pressed together under a blanket, watching something neither of us really paid attention to. One night he fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, and I didn't move for an hour, even though my arm went numb. We didn't talk about what we were yet. No need to. But the way he looked at me now, openly, without hesitation, made it clear we were past the point of guessing. Still, something hung in the air, a question that neither of us had said out loud yet. That Thursday night, we were both in the kitchen after dinner. I was drying dishes while Eli leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me. I could feel his eyes on me. That quiet, calm kind of gaze that said he wasn't just admiring, he was thinking. "You ever had something like this before?" he asked suddenly. I set down the towel. "Like what?" He tilted his head slightly. "Whatever this is." I thought about lying, making it sound casual. But what was the point? "No," I said. "Not like this." Eli nodded slowly, like he wasn't surprised. "I haven't either," he admitted. "I've been with people, gone out with a few girls. Nothing serious. I never let it go beyond a certain point." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me, long and quiet. "Now I want more. With you." The words landed heavy. Not in a bad way, but in that real way, where you can feel the moment cementing itself inside you. I stepped closer to him, hand brushing the edge of the counter beside his. "You sure about that?" I asked. His eyes didn't waver. I've never been more sure of anything. We stood there in the kitchen, just looking at each other. Then, slowly, I reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. There was no firework moment, no dramatic kiss, just fingers intertwined in a warm kitchen with the hum of the fridge in the background. Simple, grounded, real. That night, he knocked on my door before bed. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, eyes soft. I stepped aside to let him in. We lay down in my bed, fully clothed, just curled up next to each other under the blanket. His arm wrapped around me, his nose near the back of my neck, his breathing slow and steady. It was the first time I'd ever fallen asleep in someone's arms and not felt like I needed to perform or pretend. I just felt safe, wanted, home. The thing about falling for someone you already live with is there's no hiding, no leaving at sunrise, no playing it cool over text, no pretending it didn't happen when you run into each other at the gym 3 days later. It's just you and him, brushing teeth side by side, sharing coffee in silence, bumping shoulders as you squeeze into the kitchen at the same time every morning. And I think that's what made it feel real, because after that night, the one where he climbed into bed next to me like it was the most natural thing in the world, everything just got simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Eli didn't suddenly become a different person. He was still reserved, Still took a few hours to talk about anything deeper than the weather. But his walls were lower now. I started to notice the ways he showed up. The second coffee he made in the morning without asking, the way he always turned down the volume when he knew I was on a Zoom call, the small notes he left on the fridge. Bought more oat milk, or leftovers are yours, or you looked good in that black tea this morning. It was all subtle. Quiet, thoughtful, like him. I don't know when I started referring to him as my boyfriend in my head. Maybe it was when we went grocery shopping and he automatically grabbed the cereal I liked without asking. Or when he introduced me to a friend from work as, quote, someone important. Or maybe it was just the way he looked at me sometimes. Steady, present, like I was the only person in the room. We never had the talk. We didn't need to. One night, maybe a month after that first moment, the day he saw me changing and didn't look away, we were lying in bed again. The TV was playing something in the background, but neither of us were really watching. He turned to me suddenly, propping himself up on one elbow. "You know," he said, "if you hadn't left your door cracked open that day, I don't know if I ever would have figured it out." I raised an eyebrow. "Figured out what?" "That I liked you. That I wanted something more than a roommate." I smiled. "So you're saying this whole thing happened because I'm bad at closing doors?" He smirked. "Basically." I leaned in, brushing my nose against his. "Remind me to leave it open more often." He kissed me then, slow, unhurried, and I felt everything settle. There was no more second-guessing, no more reading between the lines. It was just him and me, in a bed that used to be mine and now somehow felt like ours. And the funny thing is, sometimes the smallest things, a crack in a door, a glance held too long, a choice not to look away, can change everything. And in our case, they did.